Britain's conversation. This is LBC with Tom Swarbrick.
10 to 6, Friday evening. Tom Swarbrick here on LBC means one thing. Yes, the investment session is next, the only place on British radio designed specifically to make you richer, but not before. The personal enrichment achieved by listening, agog, to Simon Mark's American Week.
Tom, while the US economy has been melting down this week, and we will get to that in a moment, the drama of the president's trade war has obscured some other really nasty stuff that he's been up to. For anyone who doubts whether this American government is already in authoritarian mode, you only need to listen to what was going on in the Oval Office on Wednesday.
The next presidential memorandum we have for you relates to Miles Taylor. You may recall that Miles Taylor served in the Department of Homeland Security during your previous administration.
As the stock markets were collapsing and trillions of dollars in value was evaporating from America's balance sheet, President Trump was presented with two executive orders to sign. Like the Soviet Union's Joseph Stalin, Romania's Nicolae Ceausescu, or North Korea's Kim Jong-un before him, he authorized a Justice Department investigation into whether two former members of his government committed treason, a crime that is still punishable in the United States with the death penalty.
I said, who the hell is Miles Taylor? And he made a living on going on CNN talking about the president.
Miles Taylor is the former Department of Homeland Security official who turned on Trump during his first term, writing an anonymously penned opinion piece for the New York Times describing acts of resistance that were taking place behind the scenes. He then went on to write a book called Anonymous that left Washington scrambling to unmask him. The president has already decided on his fate.
We're going to find out whether or not somebody's allowed to do that. I think it's a very important case, and I think he's guilty of treason, if you want to know the truth, but we'll find out.
The president's felt-tipped pen signed that decree, then another one targeting Christopher Krebs, the former head of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, an intelligence official during the president's first term who dared to insist that he couldn't find any evidence to support Donald Trump's false claim that Joe Biden's 2020 election victory was rigged. For him also, possible treason charges ahead.
We're going to find out about this guy, too, because this guy's a wise guy. He said, we've been proved this is the most secure election in the history of our country. Now, this was a disaster.
And this is just the start of the really serious policy of retribution that may soon convulse the Trump administration. The president has a long enemies list and is determined to use entirely sycophantic officials like Attorney General Pam Bondi and CIA Director Kash Patel to go after them. There is nobody in the president's inner circle who can dissuade him from unleashing his Rottweiler. No matter how concocted the charges, no matter the extent to which he tramples on America's constitutional protections. See also the case of Kilmer Abrego Garcia. We told you about him last week. He's the 29-year-old the Trump administration deported by mistake, they admit it, to a terrorist detention facility in El Salvador.
This is a person who was here legally. He was whisked off without any due process.
Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, a Democrat, has been trying to secure any measure of justice for his constituent for almost a month, since the day Mr. Abrego Garcia was snatched by Trump's thugs as he looked for work at a big box hardware store. Last night, after the White House spent over a week refusing to get him out of America's El Salvadorian gulag, the 9 justices of the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously ordered the government to bring Mr. Abrego Garcia home.
It's been 28 days since I lost on my husband.
His wife, Jennifer Vasquez, has been forced to spend another completely unnecessary week trying to get her man, an entirely legal resident of the United States, accused of no crime, back home.
Court ruled that indeed this should have never happened. But here I am again today, pleading that you continue to uplift his story.
Never mind the injustice, it's the sadistic cruelty that simply beggars belief, and the incompetence, which of course we have witnessed in spades, thanks to the president's monumental own goal over tariffs. In the 9 days since Donald Trump fired the opening shot in his global trade war, who can forget this golden oldie?
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day.
In fact, it turned into, as Bloomberg described it, obliteration day. More than $6 trillion lost in a market meltdown that then infected the bond market. Remember that Treasury bonds are usually considered the safe haven to which investors flee when Wall Street catches a fever. But this time around, even they were incinerated by the president's reckless, entirely elective behaviour. And by Monday, Republicans on Capitol Hill were bailing.
The other thing in management consulting we like to focus on is this concept of one throat to choke.
Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina with a question for Trump's U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer.
Whose throat do I get to choke if this proves to be wrong?
Well, Senator, you can certainly always talk to me, but
are you at the tip of the spear?
Well, I'm at the tip of the spear.
Democrats soon placed him in a chokehold. Senator Mark Warner of Virginia fuming over the fact that Australia, an American ally with a free trade agreement with the United States, was being blackmailed by Trump's tariffs. Like the UK, it was facing the supposedly bargain basement duty of 10% on all exports to America.
Getting the least bad, why did they get whacked in the first place?
We're addressing the $1.2 trillion deficit, the largest in human history that President Biden left us with. We should be running up the score in Australia.
Ambassador Greer, answer the question. They are an incredibly important national security partner. Why were they whacked with a tariff?
We're trying to address the $1.2 trillion deficit
I think that
Biden left us with.
You're a much smarter person than that answer.
And maybe he is, but like all the others, he is simply kissing the ring.
There's been some public sparring between Elon Musk and the president's trade advisor, Peter Navarro. Musk actually referred to Navarro today as being, quote, dumber than a sack of bricks.
At the White House, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was facing questions after mutiny broke out within the president's inner circle.
Look, these are obviously two individuals who have very different views. Boys will be boys.
But eventually the really rich boys, Elon Musk, Jamie Dimon of investment bank JP Morgan, financier Charles Schwab and all the others put the arm on Trump and forced a partial U-turn. The president would pause all tariffs above 10% for 90 days, except on China, now the sole major target of his trade barriers. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, who in emergency talks with the president urged him to emphasise his readiness to negotiate away the tariffs, proclaimed the whole debacle part of Trump's grand plan.
It took great courage for him to stay the course until this moment. As I told everyone a week ago, do not retaliate and you will be rewarded.
But Mr. Bessent knows that even in that fictional narrative, he was presenting only half a loaf. The president is still waging a trade war, just at the lower level of 10%. In other words, for the UK, nothing has changed. And now we all get to listen to this kind of nonsense from the president.
I'm telling you, these countries are calling us up, kissing my ass. They are dying to make a deal. Please, sir, make a deal. I'll do anything, sir.
He's driven a thriving economy into a ditch just for fun. He's completely abandoned all the talk of raising so much money from tariffs that he'll eventually erase the deficit and scrap income tax. And yet it's all a big win because countries like Cambodia and Vietnam are now on their knees before him. In fact, it's Main Street, not Wall Street, that continues to feel the worst impacts of his quixotic, up is down, black is white economic policy. We've all watched our retirement accounts and our college savings accounts hemorrhaging value, and we wait for prices at the shops to soar. Still, at least the president has a top team around him, like former professional wrestling executive Linda McMahon, currently running the Department of Education, and in an appearance earlier this week, revealing her complete lack of it.
There is a school system that's going to start making sure that first graders or even pre-Ks have A1 teaching, every year starting, that far down in the grades.
Her hosts at an education summit in San Diego nodded sagely as not once but twice she referred to artificial intelligence, AI, as A1.
Wasn't all that long ago that we're going to have internet in our schools. Woo! Now, okay, let's see A1 and how can that be helpful?
I'm sure she'll update us as she finds out, except she won't because Trump has tasked her with closing the Department of Education. After all, this country is already so well schooled. Back at the White House, I was particularly struck this week by the president's own explanation of his partial U-turn on tariffs.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting, yippy, you know? They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid.
So the man who claimed last week to be paying no attention to the markets had really been paying attention to the markets. He will already know then that they have not been mollified by his partial climb down on Wednesday, and questions loom about the extent of his own possible insider dealing after he posted a social media message that morning telling everyone it was a great time to buy, and signing the message DJT, not only his personal initials but also quite by chance, the stock market symbol for one of his companies. On and on it goes, Tom. Whatever you do this weekend, don't get too yippy out there.
From Washington, D.C., Simon Marks, American Week.